Hello and welcome to the Backdoor Cup podcast. We are sitting here in Galway with Conor Whelan and we had a conversation about all things hurling, about Galway's season last year, about how they foster togetherness and belonging in the group and how that differs nowadays versus what it did when he first went into the setup 10 years ago. We also talk extensively about mental health in this episode, and we talk a little bit about Clare's win in the All-Ireland as well. So now, onto the podcast. Conor Whelan, welcome to the Backdoor Cup podcast. You are our first hurling man on the podcast, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct on?
Thanks so, yeah, thanks so. Thanks for having me. Hopefully we haven't forgot anyone.
Yeah. We find it hard to get the hurling lads on, so we do.
Yeah, so I wouldn't know what end of a hurdle hole, so probably stay away from us.
But yeah, how are you getting on?
Not too bad now, yeah, not too bad. Race week behind us, so yeah, good.
Did you go to the races?
I didn't go, no, I didn't get a chance. We were training at the club all week, so yeah, I didn't get a chance to go, but yeah, it looked pretty good.
Would you be the type now that you wouldn't even bother going on the dry?
Yeah, I would be. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I suppose I just probably be full duck or no dinner really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wouldn't bother, I suppose, really. Yeah.
And you're facing into the club championship now, but it's probably been a decent block of club training, apart from you being away on holidays, I suppose. But
yeah, we probably got longer than we probably would have liked. I was travelling South America and Central America as well for I think just over 4 weeks, so I got a nice break. Probably a bit longer than I had anticipated, but yeah, it's definitely, I suppose, travelling something that I always am passionate about doing, and yeah, another continent ticked off. So
Do you ever find much of a challenge or pushback whenever you're saying, here I'm away here for a couple of weeks? Or
I think kind of depends on the time of year that you go. I suppose last year I went at the end of the year. I did November, December and January. I did Australia, New Zealand and Japan. So yeah, I suppose that's eaten into inter-county season. And then the year before that I went during the club for the first, I suppose I missed 2 or 3 championship games. Yeah, it's probably an unwritten rule in the GAA culture about but I suppose I think I've 13 or 14 seasons played with my club, so yeah, I just felt I wanted to go and travel Asia, so I did that for I think 2 months, and then I came back and played the rest of the club season and then headed off again. So yeah, I think over the last couple of years we've ticked off a couple of countries, alright.
Nice one.
I actually saw you walking down Cudgee Beach one morning last year and you were gone past me before I realised it was you. But I remember thinking, because it was about 5:30, 6 a.m. in the morning, and I think you had a suitcase with you, and I was like, was that Conor Whelan there? Like, because I think he had only finished up a few weeks prior, maybe.
Yeah, so I went 2 days after the All-Stars. So the All-Stars was on Friday.
That was it, yeah, because I had a look to see, was he not at the All-Stars?
I went on the Monday, yeah. Then we travelled up the East Coast. One of my best friends, 2 of us did it together. We did it for 3.5 weeks. It's definitely one of the best things I'd say I've ever done in my life. Started off in Cairns, up the Great Barrier Reef, and skydiving in Early Beach and all that. So yeah, it was class. And then came down to Sydney for Christmas and on to New Zealand then, and then I went to Japan solo then. That was quite an experience. But yeah, it was class.
Some lads after the season ends probably struggle to switch off from hurling. Is the travel a conscious thing to switch off from the humdrum everyday life of Ireland, or is it just something that you feel you gain perspective from?
I think it's double-edged. Like, I think definitely you probably exert so much into not only hurling but life as well, and you know, I'm doing a PhD at the moment and work a bit in business development then as well, so life is very busy, and I just find you know, life is so short that I try to block out maybe 2 months of the year where I just say, look, I'm off the grid here, put on your out office email and, you know, just be completely. And I just found in the past when you go away for say a week or 10 days that it only takes you a couple of days to switch off. Whereas, you know, I just love the hustle and bustle of rocking down to, say, some hostel place, and you know, you're just the same as every other person, and you don't know anyone, and you're out of your comfort zone, and you have to, I suppose you have to just, you know, integrate. And I also find that you learn so much as well, and you know, I'm kind of one of those people that I love learning about other people's lives and the journey that they're on, and you know, the different things that happen to them along the way, and understanding, I suppose, that there's a million different ways to live your life. And you know, I'll never forget being in Asia and just seeing how little they had in terms of materialistic things, but how happy they were. And I think that feeds into my PhD as well on mental health. And I suppose I've always been interested in understanding mental health and, you know, how the mind works. And when you see people in what we class as a third world country that have way less than we have, like money and cars and houses, but they're actually happier, then I remember just thinking, like, I just thought it was mad, like. So yeah, I suppose from an education perspective, I think it's definitely opens your eyes, and like I definitely encourage every GA player to go and travel at some stage and see the world as well. Like,
is it easier to travel now than it was a few years ago, maybe when you first came into the setup, or have you always been able to block out those 2 months of the calendar?
I think it's, to be honest, I think it's nearly harder now, to be honest. I think, you know, I found that, you know, we're with the club now, and I suppose, you know, that'll probably go on until October, and then you're going to be back with your inter-county team in November, and then, you know, that's all the way through, basically. So I suppose I find it hard to go and travel when, you know, even when you're in South America, you know, you're coming back to perform for your club, so it's still challenging at times. Whereas I think the older model, you know, you were nearly guaranteed November to yourself and a bit of December, and then you went back, and you know, your first championship game was the 28th of May. So yeah, I suppose some players will probably tell you they prefer the split season, and that's, you know, it's definitely down to the individual. But for me, I suppose I kind of prefer the older model in terms of the time you got off, but also the time you got with players. Like, I find that we just don't get time. You know, you get a team bonding session during the league, and then that's it, and you don't really get to spend time with the group outside of training, I suppose, really.
Do you train when you're away? Like, as in when you went away in that Central America, South America, or did you try to switch off? I
wouldn't really, like, I know it's never really one of them people that went away training. I think, yeah, I definitely take downtime, and I might go for a jog here and there or something like that. But no, I'd usually switch off and just, I try to immerse myself in the culture as much as possible. You know, like Japan, you're just going out exploring, you know, it takes you hours to try and figure out where you're even going. So I didn't really have much time for training out there. But no, it's like, you know, you just head off and you go to a couple of temples, and you're kind of learning about the country and stuff like that. And yeah, I suppose training wouldn't really be, you know, if I had time in the morning maybe or something. But, you know, I try to prioritise, I suppose, getting as much as I can from it. And if I have time to train out there, great. And if I don't, I know that when I come back, I just find that I suppose I end up hitting it harder when I'm back then, because I've had my break, and that's kind of always how I've kind of worked, I suppose, really.
And obviously, if you're backpacking, you don't bring a hurley with you.
No, Jesus, no. You do well to have a pair of shoes with you. No, you wouldn't. Jeez, no, I wouldn't. I kind of put the hurl away and all that, and just, you know, it's kind of metaphorical. You kind of put it all in the press, and you just tip off, and you know, you have what you have, and you know, that's it really. You just go and enjoy it and explore it, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
You just touched on there the fact that now you find there's less opportunities for bonding with the group outside of training. Was that always the case? Like, when you were a young lad coming into the team, do you find that there was more opportunities for bonding?
I definitely think so, yeah. I think the league was probably more spread out, and then the championship games, there was 2 or 3 weeks apart, so you know, you went out and had your nights out and stuff like that, and I think they're very, very important for a group. And I think, you know, I think the GA culture is kind of mad in ways. Like, you know, we have this whole anti-drinking culture where, you know, it's kind of seen as the answer to any issues that you're having. And then, you know, I was in the sauna over in Salt Hill couple of weeks ago, and I was chatting to Bundyaki, and he was telling me that a short turnaround for them is 5 days, so they only do one night, and then if they have 6 or 7 days, they might even go the second day. And I'm just thinking, like, the notorious club drinking bans here in Galway starts off with about 2 or 3 months, like, and it's definitely something that as a young lad I found that you really kind of let off the shackles, and you meet people. You kind of gel with your players on a night out, and you get talking to somebody who you mightn't have been sitting beside in the dressing room, because we are creatures of habit. You usually sit in the same place in the dressing room, you train at the same time, you go out. I think it's very much rhythmic, and I find that for young lads coming in, I found for myself when I was younger that I definitely got massive value from gelling with players outside of the group, and you have the bit of crack in on Tuesday night at training and stuff like that, and I think that's vitally important. And we probably lost that during COVID, and I'm not sure have we really regained it, I suppose, really.
Do you find now in the place you are in the group that with those lack of opportunities to go for a few pints, you struggle a little bit more to gel with the younger lads than maybe you did when you were a young lad and James Skell was throwing his arm around you on a high stool?
Yes and no. I suppose you'd always try and make a conscious effort, particularly for younger players. But I just think the group as a collective, I think in terms of gelling a group together, it's a difficult thing to do. And, I think it goes from macro to micro, so, wide to narrow, where players have their own, I suppose, motivations to be there, and then trying to get alignment in terms of how you want to play and where you want the group to go, and everyone singing off that same hymn sheet. And I've often found that social settings have been places where the thing that needs to be said can be said as well. And I've had, I suppose, peers of mine that have said stuff to me in the past when we've been out and stuff, where things they weren't happy, that I suppose from my perspective, and I found it a very, I suppose, ideal setting to be like, okay, that's probably fair enough. Whereas when you're training, and obviously you're going to give feedback to players and stuff, but I think it's probably an opportunity that people look at it and say, Jesus, the Galway boys are out there in the beer, like, but I think it's a great chance for players to gel and probably discuss things, and because we're all trying to go to the same place, and there's going to be players frustrated, and if you look at the trajectory of a player's inter-county career, I'd say I can probably resonate with an awful lot of them, and I think it's the same for lots of players, that players who are struggling to make it might be frustrated, but they might meet probably a senior player and chat to him about it on a night out, whereas I think in the group dynamic it's hard to find time because you're trying to maximise your own capabilities, I suppose, really. So
do you think when you're saying about obviously the calendar has a wee bit to play in terms of not having as many opportunities to go after, but do you think players are starting to evolve to not wanting to go out as much, or
I think so, I think probably, you probably look at the levels that it's gone to, and I suppose players probably look at that and say, alcohol is gonna hinder me. And look at I that's just my view on it. I've always felt that to push the reset button for me that time, that a couple of pints is no harm, but each player to their own, I suppose, really. But I suppose I was just looking at it from a group dynamic, and how to, I suppose, maximise the, I suppose, togetherness of the group, I suppose, really.
100%. No, I get that. Like, there's been some of the nights out you have with the team, like, it's it does more for you than a week's training or
definitely.
Like, but there's definitely doesn't seem to be as many opportunities to get something like that in these days.
Yeah, I suppose when you're successful, like, you get the team holiday, which is essentially everything that you needed, really.
Yeah.
And like, we went away in 15 and 17 and 18, and then we went to Australia in 19. So like, we had loads of opportunities where it's the same group essentially over that period of time that was heading away, and as you said, like, the memories from that is just absolutely unbelievable stuff. Like,
it's just the nature of Ireland that the way our culture is, our main opportunity for connection and conversing comes in the pub.
Yeah, look, it's definitely something you see from travelling, that drink is definitely ingrained in our culture. You meet someone travelling and they ask you where you're from and you say you're from Ireland, and it's like, oh, you must be good crack because you're from Ireland. So I think, look, it definitely, I think GA probably creates that binge culture then where you get knocked out and no one bats an eyelid at going for 4 or 5 days straight, and
or night if you're at that.
But
it's I think, look at I think we definitely offer more as a country than just that, but I think that's very much our reputation, according to my travels anyways. That's kind of what we're mainly known as.
You said something interesting, that sometimes things that need to be said are more capable of being said when you're having a few pints. So in any team that's going to be successful, you're going to need a culture of brutal honesty. If you're saying things like that need to be said in a group setting, in a team meeting, is it a little bit harder because lads maybe have their backs up to defend themselves, whereas in the casual setting of having a few pints, it's a little bit easier to just say something casually to someone in a one-on-one and not in front of the entire group, and then maybe because it's a casual setting, they'll take it on board or be more likely to take it on board.
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's probably two aspects that I think certainly for some younger players coming through, they probably don't understand the standard of what it takes, I suppose, really. That's not being harsh or critical, it's just, you're coming from a club environment, or you're coming from minor or under 20, and the level is just absolutely massive. There's that aspect, and then there's, I suppose, the person who's taking it. Then I think you have to be, I think you have to be very brutally honest with yourself as a player and say, be able to critically analyse it and say, where am I at, like? And I think in your heart and soul as a player, over time, what you need to do and I suppose where you're at on that journey. And I suppose you have to have a player that's, I suppose, willing to take the criticism and not see it as being personal, that it's just for the benefit of the group. And a lot of the time it comes down to your relationship with the player as well. I think if you don't have a relationship, it's probably harder to I suppose get them to understand your perspective. So yeah, it is difficult, and I suppose you're relying pretty much on your leadership group to, I suppose, drive the standards in training and I suppose help players to see the level, I suppose, really.
I'm interested to ask you about the influence of maybe the culture in Galway on the Galway setup, particularly around, you said you were having a conversation with Bundy Aki there, and I know that over the last couple of years, Henry, when he was manager, had said that you were getting closer as a group, and I know that Johnny was in as S&C and he took a lot from the culture of rugby and brought it in to try and bond the group. Has that influenced your behaviours as a group, and has there been things brought in the last few years to try to get you to integrate a little bit more or be a little bit closer that maybe weren't there previously? Well, without giving too much away, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's probably a difficult question to answer. I suppose you kind of have to understand the dynamics of a group, and I think obviously we came from 2017 where you're kind of that cycle that went all the way through to probably 2020, 2021, and then I suppose COVID happened where you had, I suppose, an unrealistic chance of gelling a group, to be honest. And we had new management that came in. Some lads stepped away. Joe and Aidan Hart and a few of the boys that stepped away, and then you had younger players coming through. So I think when Henry inherited the group, it was post-COVID where the group had changed a lot, and I suppose that's the challenge of, say, any team. Like I'm a Chelsea fan at the moment. You see how much that's changing and how difficult it is to integrate that, and I suppose you kind of start on a journey then, and I suppose you're trying to build something new, and that takes time. And obviously Johnny's a very good lad. We had Lucas there before that, and Henry comes in and brings a fresh management team and some new players and stuff like that, and that takes time. And I think we're not any dissimilar from other teams. You know, we've always been playing against Clare in challenges and stuff over the years, and you know, there's not a major difference between their group and our group. I think they probably have some of that older guard that's still there playing, whereas we've actually brought through a lot more younger players, I think, really. So yeah, I think it's probably something that is constantly evolving, and I think no panel stays the same. So every year, you know, this year coming again in 2025, there's going to be players that'll step away, there'll be players that come in, and I think that's the challenge for every single group, is getting the players to gel together and realise that they're on a journey, that this isn't just, you know, you come down training, we tug out, we play a game at the weekend, that, you know, that you stand for something and that you're trying to go somewhere. And you know, I think that's the challenge for every single group, I suppose, really.
You've said over the last couple of years that the group was kind of in somewhat of a transition post-COVID, with a number of those team leaders leaving or stepping away and then new lads coming to the fore. Given that you're now going to go through a new cycle with new management, is it hard to realise the potential of the group, because it seems like you're going to go through another transition now? Or how do you view the place that the team is in now, and what is the expectation of the group? As hard as that is to say in the post-season.
I don't really buy into a lot of the sensationalism around it. I think, you know, look, we obviously had a very disappointing season. You know, we never really got going. But like, every season comes down to fine margins, and you know, I often look at that Kilkenny game in Salt Hill, and you know, we missed a few chances, and I was as guilty as anyone that day. And if you end up getting over that, your season can be very different. And yeah, look, I think, you know, whoever comes in, I think obviously it's a difficult job, but I think it's no different to lots of other teams. I think you're not as far away as you think, and I think when you win, you're probably never as good as people say you are, and when you lose, you're probably never as bad as people say you are. And you know, there's no question of the calibre of players that we have in Galway. I think it's just, you know, gelling that together, and you know, 1 or 2 tweaks, and I wouldn't be as pessimistic about it really as you know, you meet people on the street that tell you we need 14 new players or 11 new players, and you know, there's no team in the country that goes and brings in 11 new players. Like, you know, it just doesn't, that's not how it happens really.
Probably something similar in Antrim, I suppose, to what you're going through in the football sense, that
turnover of players.
There's been a couple of years maybe where success hasn't been achieved, and then there's probably criticism that comes in external that is sensationalised, as Conor said.
Yeah, 100%, definitely. Like, you get, I think the biggest thing in Antrim is probably just the turnover of players and the turnover of managers in the last 10-15 years probably, like, but going off the last couple of years, we've had a real consistent bunch. Like, there's, even in that, like, when you say the team has been as consistent as it probably has been, you're still having players coming and going every single year. Like, off the top of my head, I know 2 for definite that are gone from just the panel there, and there might be 1 or 2 that'll come in, and there might still be some lads that don't come back from next year, but you just have to kind of get on with it anyway and work with who's there. Doesn't really change the goals, doesn't change like what you're working towards, like, but it's just the cycle of teams and the way players' careers go.
Is there a danger now that the GA becomes more of a cycle of managers coming in and out rather than persisting? Or maybe Kieran McGeeney has changed that for the better now, given that last year a number of people were trying to. He's
probably an exception to the rule though, really. Like, I think, you know, most inter-county managers would look at it and say 3-4 years. Like, I think the level that it's gone to and how much time it's taken, even from a management perspective, you know, it's, you know, the idea of rocking down an hour before training and coming up with it all there, like, that doesn't happen. Like, you know, there's meetings upon meetings amongst management even, and you know, you look at the time that Henry was putting into it and his management team, and you know, I'd know Eamon O'Shea personally, and you'd see how much time he puts into it, and you know, meeting players during the week and doing sessions with them on their own and stuff, and you know, it's just a whole different level, I suppose, really. And I think
it's probably a lot harder as well with the travel commitment. If the manager in question or the selector in question is travelling from outside the county a big distance multiple times a week, that commitment for longer than 3 or 4 years, as you said,
it's probably not sustainable. Like,
so it's Gleeson finished up with Antrim there. Like, that's, I think, probably a big part of it is probably the the travelling too, like he's obviously done a brilliant job, but yeah, that's serious travelling, serious miles on the road, like.
But you're still going to look for the best person for the job in any management position as well. You're not going to worry so much as if they're from the county or if they're not. If you're with a county that has more of a long-term vision and needs a lot of development, is there value in maybe putting someone in that's going to be there for a lot longer, that will be sustainable to continue with?
Probably depends on the level too, like it depends on what the goals are and if they're meeting the standards, they get close to those goals, like. I think if you're just getting someone in out of convenience, it's not. I don't think that's the right option. But I think like the way players will travel from, you probably have loads of lads living in Dublin, they'll still travel home to play. Like I think managers are nearly even more bought in than players. Like as you say, the hours that they're putting in, the video work, the meetings, travelling, like they're mad for it as well. Like so, I'd say they're happy enough to do the travelling at times. Yes, I'm sure at times they're probably going, right, is this worth it, or is this is the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak, like. But yeah, like any manager you meet loves the game, like they're going to be willing to drive a bit of time for a couple of years anyway, like.
Did you find any tangible differences with having an external manager coming into previous years where you maybe had someone from Galway in there, in terms of the culture of the group or the standards that were being driven or what was accepted? Because maybe when somebody comes in from external, they come in with a fresh perspective and are able to point out blind spots, I suppose, that you're not going to be able to see because they're blind.
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose like it's very hard to compare. I suppose Micheál was the one who was the inside manager before that, and yeah, I suppose everything got to do with him is associated with happier times. So yeah, look, I suppose it's probably difficult to say. I think we were just on such a journey in I suppose during that period of time under Micheál, and then in fairness, Shane O'Neill came in and he was very good as well, and Henry as well. Like so, I suppose they all bring different things to the table, I suppose. And you look back in some seasons where you were successful and you think everything's perfect, and you look back on seasons where you're unsuccessful and you're just, I suppose, disappointed, I suppose, really. And I think that's probably the only way that you look at it, really.
I know it's a slightly funny question after the conversation we just had, but do you think the fans and the media place too much of an emphasis on who the manager is slightly when the margins are so fine? Like we're seeing that in the hurling space, essentially anybody can beat anybody, especially this year. So yeah, success versus failure is a very fine line. Given who Henry is and what he's achieved in the game, I think the media were always going to have, I suppose, an obsession with Henry taking on his first management job. And I suppose media is not something that I'd be really too zoned in on. Like I go off social media during the season, so I wouldn't really be reading anything or seeing anything. So I'd be trying to limit as much interaction with anyone outside the group as possible, really. Outside of your close friends and family. So yeah, I suppose there will be stuff written and stuff out there, but I suppose I'm long enough in the game to see that things change very fast too. So yeah, I suppose when you win, as I said already, the management, everything is perfect. Every change he did was right, and when you lose, it doesn't matter if you lose by a point or you lose by 10. It's like he should have done this or he could have done that, or like we love Captain Hindsight in Ireland, where we say all the things that he should have done. But when you're walking in their shoes, I suppose it's very, very different. You've been in the setup now for a decade, though. Can you see major differences in the years that you were successful versus years that you weren't, or is it very much that we don't appreciate how much luck is involved in going the whole way to winning an All-Ireland or Leinster?
Yeah, well, I suppose the first year I came in kind of halfway through the season. Like my first game was an All-Ireland quarter-final. I'd never played under 21 county hurling even. So yeah, I suppose I probably didn't understand. I was playing in an Ireland final at the age of 18, and I probably didn't appreciate how difficult it is to even get there. And I suppose that's even looking at the Galway footballers last weekend. Your heart goes out to them because you know how difficult it is to actually even get back to the final. let alone winning it. So I think when Micheál came in, I think we just felt we'd been close a couple of times before, and we felt we were on a journey to achieving something, and we were like, it's a matter of time, like. And we lost to Tipperary by a pint in 16, and then won it in 17, and lost by a pint in 18, and then got knocked out on a score difference in 19. So you always felt, I suppose, you're thereabouts. And then, you know, even during COVID, like, you always believe as a group, and I don't think I've ever tugged out for Galway in 10 years and felt, Jesus, we don't have a chance here today. So, you know, some days you go out and, as you said, something, you just get the rub of the green, and other days you go out and it might be something like the Leinster final of last year, where, you know, you couldn't even script it really. But yeah, there's definitely a massive amount of luck involved, and yeah, I suppose you're just relying on performing on the day, and, you know, that's essentially what it comes down to.
Have you found, because the argument that's always put forward by people that don't like hurling is, sure, Munster hurling and the Munster Championship is the only one worth watching, but this year in particular, and maybe in previous years as well, it's just captain hindsight, as you said, and maybe recency bias, the Leinster Championship was really, really competitive. They were all tight games, and you had to work very hard to get your wins in it. Is it getting closer? Is the gap narrowing in the Leinster Championship?
Well, I think they're two very different championships. I think the Munster Championship is, you know, it's a massive deal. I think the closest I ever came to a Munster Championship game was the replay in 18 against Clare and Thurles, and, you know, the atmosphere down there was absolutely unbelievable. And whereas I found the Leinster Championship is very, very physical. Like, every team you're coming up against is, you know, really, I suppose, every ball is tooth and nail, whereas I find the Leinster final, or the Munster hurling, is more, you know, it's kind of 100 miles an hour, whereas the Leinster Championship is very physical and dogfight and that kind of style. And I think when it comes down to, you know, as you said, you know, the top 7 or 8 teams on any given day, you know, whether it's Leinster or Munster, you know, you would be fancying your chances, but you also know that you're going to get a serious game. And yeah, I suppose we've come up against a lot of Munster teams as well, and yeah, I'd say, I'm not sure the numbers, but I'd say we have a pretty decent record against them. And, you know, obviously Kilkenny was there before Limerick, and they were dominating as well. So yeah, look, I think the Munster Championship will always have the prestige, but the Leinster Championship isn't a bad championship either.
It's not easy. But you said that about when you went to watch Antrim play Wexford this year, you couldn't get over the sheer size of some of the lads, and then the hits in it.
Yeah, just when you saw them coming out, you were like, when you see them all stand beside each other, you're like, that doesn't look like a big team. And then you see them stand beside someone in an Antrim team, you're like, right, fuck, if that's the size of him, that's the size of them all, sort of thing. Like, but yeah, just it was.
And then you give him a hurl.
Exactly. But it was the fact that there was actually, I've saw Lee Chin in person twice. Once he was walking into a bar in Belfast, and I was like just looking beside him, just looking up at him, like, just going, holy shit. And then I saw him on the pitch that day, and I couldn't even spot him until I realised, like, you get on the ball and heard everyone. I was like, fuck, there he is there. And I was like, he just blends into everyone. Like, I was like, the size of them boys is insane. So yeah, you can only imagine that it's going to be a physical encounter there. Like,
when you're playing inside, then what type of back do you not like playing against? Because you don't really get involved in as much of the argy-bargy, and you do quite well to be evasive when quite well is an understatement in your attacking ability.
Yeah, I suppose, look, I think when you play inside, you accept that you know, it's going to be tough going. I basically view it as you're kind of running the channels inside, and yeah, I think the role of an inside forward has probably changed an awful lot over the last while. I think one time you were probably the one that you know, is picking up the pass and taking the score, whereas now I think a lot of the time you're nearly running the channels inside, and yeah, you're still getting scores, but a lot of the time you're recycling back outside because the defences are usually dropping a centre back or something like that. But yeah, I think, look, you obviously need to be strong, and you obviously need to be fast, and I think I'm fortunate enough that I have a decent bit of pace and a bit of strength. So I think I think I work very hard on the basics of the game, and I think, you know, when the ball bounces or your first touch or catching it inside, I think you have to nearly be able to, you know, I think you have to be able to win any kind of ball in the modern game inside, and I think you always have to be, I suppose, always have to be an option that if the half back line are coming out with a ball and they're under pressure, that if they launch it long down the field, that you're there. And, you know, I always say that any ball is a good ball for a forward. Like, I don't really mind too much about how it comes in, as long as it comes in, really. So I think, look at your, like, defenders have different styles of playing. Full back line, they usually try and stop you from playing, so they usually try and spoil the ball, and with dropping sixes and stuff like that, it can be difficult. But, you know, some games you go out and, you know, I think an inside forward works off 7 or 8 balls a game. Some days that translates to 2-3, other days it translates to a point and 2 assists. And, you know, I think I've never really worried too much about the scoreboard. I think as long as we as a team win, I think I'm just happy to kind of play my role, really.
You'd be known, though, to be able to find a solution to a problem quite creatively. Like, you'd have a bit of magic here or there to get out or get through a narrow gap. So most lads that are probably put on you to do a marking job are probably thinking the main way to stop Conor Whelan is just stop him getting the ball, full stop. Do they try to be quite physical off the ball with you to try to limit your movement, I suppose, so that you can't get into positions to get the ball?
Yeah, I think you're always involved in a little bit of afters and stuff like that. But, you know, I suppose, you know, I suppose I come from a background where, you know, you just got to keep going, really. And I think perseverance and, you know, sticking to what you're trying to do. And I always just view defenders and what they're trying to do is them trying to take me away from what I'm trying to do. And, you know, that's why I never really engage in anything outside of just winning the ball, really, because it's kind of just bringing me away from what I'm trying to do. So yeah, obviously you're going to be just pulling and dragging and whatnot, but, you know, you just got to keep going. And, you know, for a forward, it takes one ball to change it. And I've always held that view that, you know, he might win 2 or 3 off me, but there's another ball coming, and this could be the difference. And yeah, I think you just got to play what you see. And, you know, I think sometimes you have to change the way you're playing depending on who you're on. Like, say Hugh Lawler is very, very fast, so, you know, you probably have to work on the sidestep and different movements like that, whereas, you know, different players have different ways of playing. Like, some will play from behind, some will try and play in front, and then you're probably relying on the boys out the field to, you know, you've different patterns of play of how you operate depending on who you're on, and it's kind of up to them to kind of half execute as well and try and help you out.
Talk to me about your creativity then. Like, do you think that has come through your development, playing in the back garden with the family or extended family? You had pretty decent opposition if you're at a family event, I'd say.
Yeah, I suppose I've always kind of played on instinct, really, and I suppose I've been fortunate that my father would have taught me an awful lot of, I suppose, skills in the game. And yeah, I suppose I probably would be considered a fairly creative person. And I think I've always just kind of played what I see, and kind of I go out to try and enjoy it. So, you know, when the ball comes, I think I just kind of decide what I'm going to do, and some days it works and some days it doesn't. And, you know, I think in the GAA I've found that a lot of times in inter-county setups that the reason you got brought in is nearly bet out of you. That
literally just about
it's literally just, you know, we want you to do this and this. And I've seen the most talented players kind of get lost in, you know, track and runners and doing all, like, and I fully get the importance of it all, but I think, you know, I've always felt that you've got to have that something else, that when you're coming to a ball, that he doesn't know if you're going to go left or you're going to go right, and he doesn't know if you go right, are you going to come back to your left or back to your right. And, you know, I'd have been ingrained in terms of developing both sides the same, being able to catch the ball anywhere from below your knee to above your shoulders. And I think being able to offer more than 1 or 2 attributes, I think then you work very hard on the actual skills of the game, and I think the skills of the game is actually probably getting lost in terms of conditioning and running and all these things, and people forget that, you know, it's mastery of your skills is what's the most important. That if I'm an inside forward and I'm only getting 7 balls, if I throw up 4 of them balls and drive them wide, well then, like, you know, it doesn't matter how strong I am or how fast I am. Sure, that's so I've always kind of honed in on the concrete skills of your shooting, your first touch, your catching, and making sure that, you know, if I get the chance, that I know I have the work done, and it doesn't guarantee that it'll go over, but I can sleep better at night, even, which I probably won't. But if they do go wide, that I suppose you know that you've worked very hard at it, really, I suppose.
You mentioned that when you get the ball, you'll decide what you do. Is that a decision, or is that just, as you say, is it just flow that you said you're going off instinct? It's just
yeah. I just try to. I suppose I just try to work really hard away from it. That, you know, working on your shooting and working on, I suppose, different patterns of play. That, you know, I think it's almost like you know, I think it probably sounds strange, but I think it's almost like, you know, acting, that, you know, you've all these different performances done, that when your foot hits the line and you hit the field, that you have this playbook, and, you know, I think your subconscious nearly just
know what's happening.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that in games where, you know, I wasn't even thinking, it just happened. Whereas other games you go out and it's not going well for you and you're struggling and you're grinding really hard. Yeah. Whereas, you know, some days you go out and it's just, I think, you know, psychologists would probably call it flow, but I find that it can be like performing, really, like where you're like almost like a gladiator inside in the ring, and you just go and do your thing and you don't really think about it. Whereas that's kind of how it usually happens for me. Now, it takes a lot of time to get there, but
that time to get there, would you say that comes from just reps, knowing inside out what as you say, the different patterns of play, working on the skills, just literally having so much work of that done that, you know, when it comes into, it's just going to be natural to you? So I'd probably try and time my season to be that it's going to evolve. You know, I think the league and the Walsh Cup for us and all that, like, you're building in reps slowly, but you're not where you need to be. But, you know, I'd always trust that I suppose that the chart is going up, hopefully, and that so that when it comes to, I suppose, that championship day where the ground is hard, and that you have all that work done and you have all those plays, that I suppose, you know, you'd probably have different kind of shots off my left and different kind of shots off my right and different patterns of movement, that, you know, you open the playbook and whatever comes, like, really, I suppose. Love it.
How have you held on to that, though? Because particularly in hurling circles and at a hurling match, if you try something outside the box and it doesn't come off, it's Jesus Christ, will you put the ball over the bar? Like,
look, I suppose I've always had that inner child thing where, you know, I actually regularly think about it, where you remember your parents bringing you down to a game and you hopped out the gear bag and, you know, you threw on the shorts and you tipped out, and, you know, whatever happened. And I think, you know, that freedom, I suppose, and, you know, pure enjoyment, I suppose, really. And I think I put my career down to that, I suppose, really, is enjoying it. And obviously there's loads of days, more days than happy days, where it hasn't gone for you, or, you know, you haven't performed to the level of what other people think and stuff like that. But, you know, I think enjoying the journey as well. And, you know, there's probably more of an acceptance now as time has went on that it's not going to be perfect every day. And, you know, unless you're shooting the lights out, people are saying, Jesus, he's not going well, or blah, blah, blah. But, you know, for me, it's just pure enjoyment. And, you know, my family, I'm fortunate enough that they're all alive and they all come to games, and, you know, even meeting them on the pitch afterwards and having those special moments. And, you know, that's, for me, that's what it's all about. And, you know, I'm not going out there, you know, trying to please someone else. I'm going out there to try and win as part of the team. And I suppose I just have that inner enjoyment. And, you know, some days it'll go for you and some days it won't. But I suppose the way I view it is, I'm not trying something that I haven't done before. I think, you know, you have rehearsed it, and you have, I suppose, you have that creative mind where, you know, I think you have different types of players. You have players that, I suppose, love the consistency of routines and reps and know exactly. Whereas I think for a forward, particularly an inside forward, that there's got to be lots of innovation in terms of how you're going to beat a player and what you're going to do. And you know, I even probably like thinking back to last year against Tipperary for that goal in the quarter final where you put it through someone's legs. Like, you know, you can't really train for that. It's just something that, you know, as Tony Kelly said about his goal in the final, he waited for the defender to come before he decided what he was going to do. Like, it's the same pattern really, where you can't teach that. You know, it's something that kind of has to happen really in order for the goal to be scored. Like, and you know, I think I'd rather not play the game than go out and be told exactly how to play the game.
Do you think there's a benefit to you in that you've been able to keep that inner child, because when you were brought into the setup first, you actually were a child?
Like, I just think back to even when I came in, like I suppose I really believed that I was good enough to be playing, and when you look back now you think, Jesus, you know, was I? But yeah, I think, you know, the inner belief in yourself and in terms of what you can do, I think particularly in the world we live in today, I think, you know, a lot of the time we're looking for external validation, and I suppose that comes back to social media and different things like that. But you know, I think the belief in yourself, and you know, that has to coincide with a lot of hard work along the way. But you know, at the end of the day, you're heading up to Croke Park there for a final or a semi-final, or you're heading down to Thurles, and you've done all this work for 6 or 7 months. Like, what's there not to enjoy? Like, you know, like you're going out there, you have the work done, and I suppose at that stage, you know, you kind of have to give over your power and just let it happen, I suppose, really. So I think I've been fortunate that I suppose I've been playing for 10 years and I've had the trust of management, and you know, I've a great group of players around me that they also believe in you as well. So I think belief goes from yourself, and then it's almost layered out to your teammates, to your management, to your family, your close friends. And yeah, I suppose I've been lucky that I have some great people around me as well.
Where does that belief and that perspective, so that outlook on it is class, and I would say that's definitely like I would say you're definitely in the minority of players these days that would look that way, look at it that way. Like, does that come from just experience? Have you done much work like with to me that sounds like you've done a lot of work with maybe like a sports psychologist or something, or is that just natural to you? Because I know
well, I have a master's in psychology, so okay. I suppose I've studied it that way, but I would have held that belief, I suppose, from a very young age. Like, I think I didn't make the Galway under 14 team. I was a sub. I was very disappointed with that. And then under 16 I got playing, and I suppose I always realised the value of hard work. And I think when you work hard, like, you're working hard for a reason. Like, so, you know, I think the belief probably comes from the work you've done. And you know, as Eamon O'Shea says, when you cross the white line and it's you against him, like, you know, there has to be a reason as to why you believe that you deserve to be better than him. And you know, for me, I've always felt that I suppose I've worked incredibly hard at this, and I have the work done, and I believe that I can deliver, I suppose, really. And yeah, no, I wouldn't have done a whole pile with sports psychology, but I think I've always valued the mentality piece, and I think, you know, I think a lot of players hone in on the conditioning aspect, and I think it's obviously vitally important. But you know, you can be as big and as strong as you want, but if you don't believe, like, you know, like, what's it all for? Like, yeah. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
100%. It's the evidence of knowing that you've done the work in the background that brings that belief. I just think it's class, just that having fun aspect of it, because the fun, as you say, the fun can be drilled out of you at times, like, but
yeah, I just always look at kids, like,
yeah,
when they come up to you, and you know, I can remember myself going up to the likes of Gerard Farrer and all these lads as a kid, and you know, you always said I'd love to be there, and then sometimes when you're there, you're like,
you forget why you're there.
You're kind of forgetting it, and it just passes you by. And yeah, look, I think I'll hopefully look back with no regrets in terms of, you know, enjoying it and also trying to be the best you can be. And you know, that's going to be up and down, and I don't look at seasons as success and failure. I think in terms of developing as a player, trying to improve and add different aspects to your game, and you know, always, I suppose, trying to come back the following year a better player. And I suppose that's the journey that every player is on, and I think enjoying that journey as well is probably going to give you more than if you're looking at it and saying, Jesus, you know,
go again.
Yeah. So
you're very bigger picture focused and like rational in the way you think out things, and the way you speak about that, the performance, like it's very much kind of, sure, I'll enjoy it anyway while I'm doing it. When you're playing for a county that expects success, do you ever find that you do become ruled by emotion at all, or is it something that you're quite good at, is keeping that blue head and being more bigger picture focused?
Like, look, I suppose every player goes into red at some stage, like, and like, I suppose for me, I just view it as I've always viewed playing for Galway as a massive privilege and something that you dreamed about as a kid, and I suppose there's that aspect of your life. But for me, I suppose I'm fortunate that I have other stuff going on outside, and you know, I have my PhD studies and I work a bit in business development now at Castle Group, and I have those other aspects, and then I have travel and I have family and all those different things. So, you know, I suppose I'm not going into a game where it's life and death, really. And, you know, I suppose I view it as the sun is going to come up tomorrow anyway. So, you know, if it all goes wrong, and like, say, take this season for an example, you know, you just end up going back to your club where you started, and life goes on. And, you know, I suppose it's just a part of what you do, but it's not you, like, if that makes sense. And, you know, I suppose I'm fortunate that I've travelled and seen that, you know, I might be known as Conor Whelan in Galway, but, you know, as soon as you head outside Galway and off across the English Channel and further afield, like, it doesn't, like, it's not that the GAA doesn't matter, but it's just a part of what you do, and you're absolutely blessed to be able to do it. And I suppose I'm very grateful for the things that it's given me, and I suppose the habits that you've developed and the stuff you learned along the way. But at some stage it's going to end as well, and I suppose, yeah, I think I try to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, time will tell, but I think I try to enjoy it as much as I can. And, you know, I have some great friends from it, and yeah, I try to enjoy the days out as much as possible. Like, you know, I've never been massively into the league. I've never put too much focus on it, but the championship days are something special. And, you know, even being captain of that group is something that I suppose, you know, you're absolutely privileged to do. And I don't read too much into what people say I should or shouldn't be. You know, I just try to enjoy it as much as possible. And look at it, that is difficult at times when your form is not where you believe it should be or whatever. But, you know, I think you just gotta keep going, really.
Has much of that perspective come over the time that you've been studying and working on the PhD? Do you think that's benefited you individually as well, in terms of identifying potential problems and solutions with identity in the GAA for student athletes or athletes in general?
Yeah, well, look, I suppose it's definitely a challenge in the GAA. I think for my psychology paper I did the identity of third level elite athletes, and the GAA had the biggest correlation with, I suppose, athletic identity. I think you just develop. I suppose my PhD probably opened my eyes in terms of mental health issues associated with elite athletes. And I suppose when you dial down into that, I suppose it probably comes down to viewing yourself as just that athlete, and when you're going well, you know, it's great, and when you're not, it's terrible. Whereas I've never really viewed my life as that. I've always kind of, I suppose, viewed it as it's a part of what I do. And don't get me wrong, there's probably a period in my 23, 24 where, you know, you're absolutely, you know, you reference squeezing the lemon, but you're absolutely killing the lemon, where you're just absolutely putting every single thing into it. You're repping it out to the point where it's actually counterproductive, where you're nearly tired going into inter-county games because you have so much training done. Whereas I think over time, when you step back and you say, like, the enjoyment piece is, you know, doing what you have to do to perform, but also, you know, your life outside it as well. And, you know, I was a teacher before that, and why I became a teacher was I didn't know what I wanted to do. And, you know, along with, I suppose,
you were playing with 10 other teachers as well.
I'd say 15, but But yeah, and then I suppose I looked at that and said, is this it? So I had a permanent job at the age of 23, and I was like, is this it? So I decided just to basically tear up the script and go back and start a PhD. And yeah, I think it definitely opens your horizon in terms of you take a massive risk in terms of your, I say massive risk because I think a lot of people find it hard to, you know, sacrifice their income and step away from a job that, and it's not that I hated teaching, it's just I wanted to challenge myself and say, you know, if all goes wrong, I can always come back and go teaching. But so I think I just stepped away from that and stepped into a whole different field where, you know, you're stepping into academia and, you know, I guess you probably have imposter syndrome for the first 6 months where you're like, you're doing a PhD and you're telling people that you're doing a PhD and they're like, and how's that going for you? And you're like, I don't even know what I'm actually doing. But yeah, and I think you probably learn along the way in terms of putting yourself outside your comfort zone and just going at something that, you know, even in terms of PhD, people say, and in Ireland we love to know what you're going to be. Like, it's not what you're doing, it's what you're going to be. And it's like, oh, and what are you going to do after that? And you're like, I don't know, like I've absolutely no idea. But and then I suppose I took on a master's then kind of within the first year of that, where I was like, a lot of what I was looking at, I couldn't do a PhD in psychology because I didn't have an undergraduate in psychology. So then I was in the middle of it, I suppose, understanding mental health and well-being, and I was like, well, like it's like building a house but not having the foundation in. So it's like, unless I have psychology here, like this is going to be very difficult. So I just took that on as well while I was doing it. And sure, you tell that to people and they tell you that you're mad, but I just think you probably get so engrossed in it then, where you're like, you're learning every day and you're like, geez, this is so, because it's so applicable to sport and life and relationships and everything. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and you'll just learn so much that, you know, you don't even have to prepare really when you're talking about mental health or anything. That it's not that I know everything, I know a little bit about it, but it's just so interesting and so applicable to life that I suppose it definitely does broaden your scope in terms of life.
But what would be your advice to those younger athletes that are struggling with their athletic identity being too much of a part of their personal identity? Did you actually combat that indirectly by taking on all these different things, PhD, masters? Like, you had so much going on in your life, it would probably going to be impossible to identify solely as an athlete.
I'd say the travelling was a big part of it too, was it? From my experience,
I definitely think the travelling is, like, I think most people go abroad on if you get knocked out of a championship and you go abroad and you go to which I've done as well, like, but I think that's not really that's not what I would define as travelling really. I think I think travel is, look, I just love it, and I think I love the spontaneity with it, where you're going to a place where you don't know anyone, you don't know anything, and you push yourself outside your comfort zone. And I've even seen players that have went abroad for a summer hurling and they've actually come back, I've felt more mature and more broadened in terms of life. And like, I'd say to every young lad, whether it's going hurling abroad or whether it's going travelling, to like, going travelling is not going on for a week to Albufeira. Like, that's not what I would define as travelling. But and I think I'd be very strong in career. Like, I'd be very strong on your life outside of it. Like, and I think, you know, I work with the GPA. I think a lot of their challenges are that you have a 20-year-old coming through that's, you know, essentially a full-time hurler and a part-time college student, and, you know, they might be failing the year or barely getting through, and they just don't see the importance of life outside it. And, you know, I think post career there's lots of research there in terms of the issues that come with that in terms of mental health, and I think for young people it's finding your footprint in the world. Like, and I think in Ireland our system is at 18 you decide what you want to be, and then mammy and daddy and their friends are like, what are you going to be? And you decide that you're going to go and do science in Galway, and you feel like you're pinned into that. Whereas, you know, I think we have such opportunity here in Ireland where if you decide the science isn't for you, you just go back and you start again. And, that's essentially what I done, and I probably, I'm planning to go into clinical psychology eventually. That's essentially going to be 3 years where you start all over again, and I've never really been afraid of starting over. And I think in Ireland, and I think in the world, we probably, we're probably so afraid of failing at times that we just stay going with what we know was not right. Like, and I think being like, you can define it as failure or challenges or whatever, but I think in terms of making sure you're in the right course, and I suppose my PhD is, at the moment, I'm interviewing elite GA student athletes and chatting to them, and I suppose the discrepancies between second year students who are first year students that are all in the GA, and then you come to fourth year where you're like, Jesus, I'm finishing up here soon, and you just see that, I suppose, the way they view it is a little bit different. And there's obviously differences between lads who identify more as an athlete as opposed to women, and different things like that. So I suppose it's probably a complex thing, but I think my advice would be to I suppose have different identities where, even in your friend groups or in your career or hobbies outside that, like, you were mentioning golf and different stuff that I used to go in the off season and play soccer, and that's a whole different bunch of friends that you have and a bit of crack like that. So I think just not just being, your traditional inter-county athlete that we talk about that just does the gym and does their hurling and I think life is, Jesus, there's so much out there like that. You just gotta open your eyes, I suppose, really.
That's from my experience. When I just looked at myself as Owen McCabe, the GA player and coach, like the fulfillment, just like after a while, felt great for a while being dialed in, but then after a while, fulfillment just started drop, and then you end up hating what you love after a while. Like, but that bit of freshness, getting your, like, for me, traveling, going different places, and just seeing what was actually out there, and realizing, like, even when you see on a map, like, how small Ireland is compared to the rest of the world, like, you're just like, right, you go an hour across the water, as you say, and nobody knows GA exists. Like, it puts things into perspective, all right. Like,
yeah. Last question before we finish up: can you be happy that Clare won the All Ireland?
Yeah, I would be happy for Clare. Yeah, I suppose all my mother's family are Clare, so Shane O'Donnell will be my second cousin. And then I suppose my mother is Killanena, and all her family, I suppose, really. So there's quite a bunch of them in it. So I think they're obviously our neighbours. And I would be happy to see Clare do it. Yeah.
What's the feeling like when you're at the game, like you were?
I don't really watch that many games, so I don't really enjoy watching hurling, I suppose.
But you were at the final, right?
I was at the final, yeah. I didn't have much of a choice really, but I was at it, yeah. Look, I suppose you're probably looking on with envy, like, I've been there, I've won, I've lost, so I suppose I know the feelings that are involved with it, and I suppose as you get older, you probably appreciate it that bit much more. And I was reading something Dave McInerney said, where he said that he didn't really enjoy it as much in 2013, and he was definitely going to enjoy it this time. And that's essentially where I'd be at in terms of 17. I was only 20 at the time, and probably thought we'd have a couple more by now. So I suppose I've never been massive into watching hurling. I've always found that I just enjoy playing it, and I think when I finish playing, I'll probably enjoy watching it a bit more. But I think when you're still playing, you still believe that you could be there, and you find it hard to. But then on the flip side, your second cousin is probably going to get Hurler of the Year. He wins another Celtic Cross, and like, I'd be fairly friendly with Shane, so you'd be absolutely delighted for him. And I'd actually know a good few of the Clare boys as well, like Peter Duggan and David Fitzgerald and boys, and they're dead sound, so you would be happy for them.
Well, Conor, it's been a great conversation. You're a very mentally strong individual, and like very well thought out as well, so thanks for coming on. It's been very insightful.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Great chat. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks.